The wind howled outside Eric's small, isolated cottage, and rain tapped insistently against the windows. It was a typical stormy night, and Eric had planned to spend it doing what he loved most, playing video games. His choice for the evening was The Forest, a survival horror game that had enthralled him for weeks. Eric sat hunched over his computer, the eerie glow of the screen casting shadows on his face. The in-game world was as dark and gloomy as the real one outside, but that's what he loved about it. The Forest was known for its realistic graphics and immersive gameplay, making players feel like they were truly stranded in a mysterious wilderness. As Eric navigated his character through the virtual forest, he couldn't help but marvel at the realism. The rustling leaves, chirping crickets, and distant cries of unknown creatures added to the game's eerie ambience. He had reached a point where he had built a small shelter, but there was a nagging feeling that he was missing something, some crucial part of the game's story. The storm outside intensified, with thunder shaking the cottage and lightning illuminating the room in brief, eerie flashes. Eric shivered, not from the cold, but from a sudden unease that crept over him. He glanced out the window and saw a blinding flash of lightning that struck a nearby tree. The deafening crack that followed made him jump, and the lights in his cottage flickered before plunging the room into darkness. Cursing his luck, Eric fumbled for a flashlight on his desk and managed to illuminate his surroundings. The storm had knocked out the power, and he was left alone in the dark. Eric sighed and considered shutting down his computer when he noticed something strange on the screen. The game was still running. Confused, Eric watched as the virtual forest on his computer screen continued to move. He hadn't saved his progress before the power outage, yet the game appeared to be functioning perfectly. It was as though it had a life of its own. Then, something even more inexplicable happened. The in-game storm matched the one outside his window, and the thunder and lightning synchronized with the real world. It was as if the boundary between the game and reality had blurred. Eric's heart raced as he witnessed his character, clad in survival gear, stand in the virtual forest while a virtual storm raged around him. He could feel the rain on his skin and hear the thunder echoing in his ears, but he was still in his darkened cottage. A bolt of lightning struck the tree in the game, just as it had outside, and Eric screamed as the virtual world seemed to shudder. The screen went black for a moment, and then he found himself standing in the forest. He tried to move his physical body, but it was as though he had been transported into the game. Panicking, Eric desperately looked around. The virtual forest was now his reality, and he could feel the cool breeze on his skin and the wetness of the rain-soaked ground beneath his feet. He realized with horror that he had become his in-game character. Fear gripped him as he stumbled through the dark woods, the sound of his own racing heartbeat filling his ears. He needed to find a way out, to return to his real life, but the forest was vast and unforgiving. As Eric ventured deeper into the virtual wilderness, he encountered strange and terrifying creatures that seemed as real as the world itself. Mutated monstrosities with glowing eyes and distorted faces lurked in the shadows, and they hunted him relentlessly. With each passing moment, the line between the game and reality blurred further. Eric's senses were overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest. He could taste the rain and feel the pain of every injury inflicted upon his in-game character. Days turned into nights as he struggled to survive, building shelter, finding food, and battling the horrors that inhabited the forest. Eric had no choice but to immerse himself in the game's story and objectives, hoping that by completing them, he would find a way back to his own world. As he delved deeper into the game's mysteries, he discovered that the forest held dark secrets. It was a place where reality and nightmare intertwined, and ancient rituals had bound him to this digital realm. He had to confront his deepest fears and unravel the game's enigmatic narrative to break free. With each twist and turn in the virtual world, Eric's own character grew stronger, but the horrors he faced became increasingly grotesque and surreal. The line between what was real and what was a part of the game blurred to the point where he questioned his own sanity. Eric encountered other players in the game, some trapped like him, others who seemed to be part of the game's design. They offered cryptic advice and guidance, urging him to push forward even as he felt himself slipping further into the abyss of the virtual forest. Months passed in the game, and Eric's real-life body wasted away in his darkened cottage. He had become a prisoner of the forest, locked in a relentless struggle for survival and sanity. The horrors of the game became his constant companions, and the line between the two worlds had all but vanished. Then, one fateful night, as a storm raged both in the game and outside his window, Eric finally reached the heart of the virtual forest. He faced the ultimate challenge, a nightmarish entity that held the key to his escape. With every ounce of courage he could muster, Eric battled the eldritch creature, his in-game character, and his real self fused in a desperate bid for freedom. Lightning illuminated the room, and thunder shook the cottage as he fought for his life and his sanity. As the final blow was struck, both the virtual world and Eric's real-world body convulsed in agony. The storm outside reached its climax, and the cottage was bathed in blinding light. Eric's consciousness teetered on the brink. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm subsided. The lights flickered back to life in his cottage, and Eric found himself sitting at his computer, drenched in sweat, his hands trembling. The game was closed, and he was back in his own world. He glanced at the clock and realized that only a few minutes had passed since the storm had knocked out the power. It had felt like an eternity in the virtual forest, but in reality, it had been a mere moment. Eric's body ached as though he had truly lived through the trials of the game, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the virtual world still lingered in his mind. He knew he would never look at the forest the same way again, for he had crossed a boundary few had ever dared to tread. As he gazed out at the now calm night, he wondered if the virtual forest had been a nightmare or a portal to another dimension. He had returned from the brink, but the memories of his harrowing journey would haunt him forever. And so, Eric closed his computer, the screen darkening once more. He had survived the forest, but the line between reality and the virtual world had forever blurred in his mind, leaving him to wonder what other horrors might lie just beyond the screen. Weeks turned into months, but the memories of Eric's nightmarish journey through the forest continued to haunt him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the game had left a mark on his soul, a scar that ran deeper than any physical wound. He was no longer the same person he had been before that fateful stormy night. The line between reality and the virtual world remained blurred for Eric. He found it increasingly difficult to distinguish between his everyday life and the memories of the forest. He would catch himself glancing at the trees outside his window, half expecting to see the grotesque creatures lurking in the shadows. Nightmares plagued him every time he closed his eyes, vivid and terrifying visions of the virtual forest's horrors. He would wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, convinced that he could still feel the pain of injuries sustained in the game. Eric became obsessed with the forest. He couldn't resist the pull of the game, the allure of returning to that nightmarish world. He felt an inexplicable compulsion to play it again, as though something within him had been left unfinished. His friends and family grew concerned, watching as Eric's obsession consumed him. He withdrew from his real-life responsibilities, neglecting work, social interactions, and even basic self-care. His once vibrant life had withered away, replaced by an all-consuming fixation on the game. One day, while browsing online forums dedicated to the forest, Eric stumbled upon a group of players who claimed to have experienced similar phenomena. They spoke of a secret ending, a way to permanently bridge the gap between the game and reality. The idea both terrified and fascinated him. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and the need for closure, Eric reached out to the group and began unraveling the game's deepest mysteries. They shared cryptic clues and theories, pointing him towards hidden in-game locations and cryptic messages that hinted at a way to achieve the secret ending. As he delved deeper into this digital labyrinth, Eric's grasp on reality slipped further. He became convinced that the game's creators had designed it as a portal to another world, a realm where the boundaries of physics and consciousness were bent and twisted. Eric's quest for the secret ending led him to confront not only the virtual horrors of the forest, but also his own inner demons. He questioned the nature of existence, the fragility of reality, and the limits of human perception. He felt as though he was walking a tightrope between two worlds, never quite sure where one ended and the other began. Months turned into years, and Eric's physical health deteriorated as he spent long, sleepless nights in front of his computer. His appearance became gaunt, his eyes hollow, and his once quick mind muddled by the relentless pursuit of the game's secrets. One stormy night, with lightning flashing outside his window, Eric finally uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. He had deciphered a series of cryptic symbols hidden within the game, and they pointed to a location deep within the virtual forest. It was there that he believed he would find the answers he sought. With a sense of grim determination, Eric launched the forest once more. The virtual world welcomed him like an old friend, but he no longer feared its horrors. He had become one with the game, a part of its twisted narrative. As he navigated the dark forest, Eric reached the designated location and uncovered a hidden portal. It shimmered with an otherworldly light, beckoning him to step through and complete his journey. Without hesitation, he took a deep breath and crossed the threshold. The moment he stepped through the portal, reality shattered. Eric found himself suspended in a surreal, kaleidoscopic void where time and space folded in upon themselves. He was no longer in the virtual forest, nor was he in his own world. He had entered a realm beyond comprehension, a place where the rules of existence no longer applied. In this strange dimension, Eric's consciousness expanded, and he began to understand the true nature of the game. The forest was a gateway, a bridge between worlds, and he had become its keeper. With newfound clarity, Eric realized that he held the power to shape the game and influence the real world. He could manipulate the virtual horrors, bend the laws of physics, and even peer into the lives of those who played the game. He had become a god within the digital realm, a master of both worlds. But the price of this newfound power was high. Eric was forever trapped between the virtual and the real, a spectral entity bound to the game. He could watch as players entered the forest, their fates shaped by his actions, but he could never return to his own life. And so, Eric's existence became an eternal cycle of torment and curiosity, a ghostly presence within the game, forever intertwined with the virtual horrors he had once feared. He watched as players entered the forest, their lives and sanity hanging in the balance, and he wondered if they would ever unlock the secrets he had discovered. As the years passed, legends and rumors circulated among gamers, stories of a haunted game with a secret ending that could bridge the gap between the virtual and the real. Some sought to uncover the truth, while others feared the consequences of delving too deep into the digital abyss. And as the stormy nights continued to rage outside, Eric's spectral presence remained, a silent observer in a world that had become his eternal prison. He had crossed the boundary between reality and the virtual, and now he was forever lost in the haunting depths of the forest.
I'm an icon, man. I'm a girl about a 10. I should fuck her in a bed.